Saturday Night Fry was a radio comedy show created in 1987 by Stephen Fry with an ensemble cast consisting of himself as well as future stars Hugh Laurie, Emma Thompson and Jim Broadbent. Having found success with the Cambridge Footlights and their show The Sellotapes, by the late 80s, Fry was still trying to find his feet as a writer and performer in broadcasting. He had made appearances in popular British sitcoms like The Young Ones in 1984 and Blackadder in 1986 and 87, but his own creative efforts had, up until then, failed to catch much attention in TV. He had, however, already established a presence in radio, thanks to the newly formed BBC Radio 4 show Loose Ends, where he debuted his mock academic character Professor Donald Trefusis, whose so-called wireless essays were not completely comic in their content, but were delivered with a sense of pomposity that characterises many of Fry's later comedic creations.
Parent power and democracy are as closely related as Mike Gatting and the Queen Mother, and unless someone's been keeping a very juicy scandal from me, that is not very closely at all.
Presented as a radio magazine show containing parodies of famous radio and TV items as well as sketches under the guises of reports and film extracts, Saturday Night Fry is his own spin on the tired sketch show format, paving the way for future programmes and comedic styles that depend on the audience's media literacy in order to identify humorous deviations from familiar styles. The programme is packed full of subtle details, wordplay and allusions that require multiple listens to notice, at the same time as being immediately attention-grabbing and funny. By using familiar formats and aesthetic conventions from media, Fry is able to convey unconventional ideas and absurdist concepts in a way which bypasses our conscious perception. Firstly, to create this mask of familiarity, Fry manipulates the conventional aesthetics of radio, including music, sound effects, as well as the verbal elements of rhetoric, tone and register. The programme's sketches are structured around scenes taking place in the studio, in the manner of discussion-based shows like the Today programme, with musical excerpts acting like punctuation throughout each episode to transition from one item to another, in the vein of Desert Island Disc and Radio Drive Time shows.
3 seconds to add that. Right. Good evening, and as the thunder and lightning polka fades away, it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome you, and many others too, I'm sure, to the very first Saturday Night Fry. Let me introduce myself. My name is...
While the whole thing is scripted and pre-recorded, with a limited cast playing multiple characters, it's presented as genuine, with Fry referring to the signature tune that bookends the programme, and numerous pastiches of radio reports adding to a sense of authenticity. This follows in the footsteps of satirical sketch shows like Not the 9 O'Clock News, and foreshadows parody news shows like The Day Today. As well as this, it even comments on its scripted nature, with one sketch involving the cast members rearranging the script for the programme to disorient Fry when he comes back from a toilet break.
Now that he's gone, why don't we change his script round so that when he gets back in he won't know where he is?
Brilliant.
Only to find that their plot to disrupt the programme was also scripted.
Right, Hugh, I'm leaving you in charge if that's all right. I won't be more than a couple of minutes.
Now that he's gone, why don't we change the script round so that when he gets back in he won't know where he is? Oh, damn, I didn't know that page was in there.
The lack of visual aid is something Fry fully exploits to trick the listener. Listen to this parody scene from an English period drama, and pay attention to the background soundscape in particular.
Now we're at the tea party at Mrs. Henslow's country house in Hertfordshire, and Aunt Jane is talking to Helen. But Helen, it's all arranged. Some tea?
Arrangements? You know I hate arrangements, Aunt Jane. I thought you at least understood.
Miss Sandclove, Helen.
Timothy.
The pouring sound is looped, just quiet enough not to stand out from the dialogue. We accept this as just part of the tea party ambience until we hear this.
The point. Timothy, I hate it when you do that while I'm talking to you. It's rude and it isn't hygienic. Now, where was I? Yes, it was the point. That's the point.
On a surface level, this has all the makings of a traditional scene. But by stripping all those elements away, we get a naked old woman.
It's a trifle chilly. I think I'll just slip into the house and put some clothes on.
And a man relieving himself in front of his fiancée. Without the visual element of storytelling, we put our faith in suggestive sounds to try and suss out the bigger picture, but Fry proves we can be easily misled by this. As well as using the familiar to mask the strange, Fry is able to point out the absurdity behind most of what we see as completely normal, exposing how susceptible we are to certain cues and techniques that have become commonplace in radio. Listen to this scene, which satirises upper middle class snobbery.
My God, that man's fat. I don't think I've ever seen a fatter man. And look at that woman. What an extraordinarily silly name she's got. Ridiculous. ridiculous, and what an ugly child.
Voici Madame le menu. May I ask you, perhaps, if you're going to be rude about the customers, you do it a little more quietly?
Oh, I'm sorry.
The sound design here places the voice of the main character at the forefront of a restaurant scene with an added reverb effect. This has become a shorthand in media for presenting characters' inner thoughts.
Oh no. This is a nightmare.
And Fry plays with this assumption by having her judgmental thoughts depicted in this way, but with the waiter suddenly breaking the illusion by answering back. A key source of humour in a lot of Fry's work is his experimentation with language.
Hello, we're talking about language.
This usually involves presenting familiar phrases and words in slightly altered context to point out the lapse in logic that some of them require, despite effectively serving a function of putting a point across. This approach also applies to media dialects. Fry addresses the listener directly, as other presenters would, but as a real person that he's actually interacted with.
Here I am with my friends, whom we'll meet in a moment. There you are with yours, whom I may never meet. Incidentally, we were talking last week about the different types of fish you can buy. Do you remember? And you said that you could get skate at Purvis's down the road, and I said you couldn't because I'd tried and they only had dabs and hake. Well, you were right. I bought some skate there yesterday. Old Mr. Purvis said it must...
This represents the boundary between listener and presenter being overstepped, parodying this false sense of intimacy between broadcasters and their audience. Whereas other more traditional sketch comedy is often recorded in front of a live audience, with an exaggerated style of performance more similar to the theatre and an audible laugh track reminding the viewer of the heightened action, this formal type of presentation creates a thinner line between the absurd and the real, which makes for a more complex and intriguing experience overall. Fry would later apply the role of presenter or compare to sketch comedy for A Bit of Fry and Laurie, in which they would introduce, interrupt and conclude the skits with monologues and interactions with the audience.
Soupy twist. Soupy twist.
Although in my view, the live audience and consequent laughter reduces a lot of this style's effectiveness, just by stripping back a layer of reality. Figures of speech are parodied repeatedly in the programme, as well as in Fry's later work.
I'm so sorry we couldn't help you, sir. We do try to accommodate our customers, but not being a hotel, we find it almost impossible.
Once again, Fry is making use of aesthetics to create something which sounds superficially plausible as part of conversation, but that doesn't actually make any sense when you think about it.
Mind you, I mean, that's not to say that there haven't been improvements over the week.
Oh, good Lord, I'd be the first to concede that.
No, the second. I just conceded it, didn't I?
Yes. Yes, quite right, Stephen. I'd be the second to concede that.
Yeah, you might as well be accurate over these things, don't you think?
That's right.
So, anyway, you'd be the second to concede it.
That's right.
Concede what exactly, was it?
Well, to be honest, I can't remember what it was that I would be the second to concede.
Here we see a figure of speech using the conditional tense being held up to scrutiny against reality. There's no point in Hugh saying it, as Fry already has, but if it weren't for Fry pointing that out, it would have slipped by unnoticed. But it's not just English that gets criticised for this weird lapse in logic. In one of my favourite sketches, the whole concept of language is deconstructed.
Mander Grillian Besavi Strom.
It's easy to talk Strom. Morval handipoke, stin stain.
Welcome to It's Easy to Talk Strom.
Slipwriter crant crothfall.
Let's go in here.
Harkley Trinth.
Good morning to you, gentlemen. Is there any way at all in which I can serve you?
The disproportionate length of the translations, the strange, almost English-sounding words, and the meaning behind the sentences put aside, a lot of what they're saying doesn't actually need to be said.
Moilingfruck pinty panty, one of whom is taller than the other.
If the other one had been the taller, it would of course have been Moilingfruck panty pinty.
You'd think that what he's proposing is the opposite idea, so it would make sense for there to be a corresponding translation for it. But it doesn't logically work. One of them is taller than the other, and if the other was taller, then one of them would still be taller than the other. This approach to language suggests that a lot of what's said is just for aesthetic's sake. It's decoration to conversation that doesn't add anything, but it still takes up time and attention. Verbal language relies heavily on emphasis, and depending on the context and purpose of speech, the patterns of emphasis can vary considerably. Fry exploits this. Have a listen to this introductory bit of exposition for a parody of a 50s adventure serial.
In December 1986, during the fall of 1985, Dr. John Fordyce happened upon Floric 19, a remarkable semi-genetic plasma whose fantastic properties he only became aware of when he accidentally injected himself with an untested sample of the substance one balmy spring evening in the mid-60s in his laboratory in London's fashionable Edinburgh sometime during 1958.
The narrator uses time indicators to not only set the scene, but also to create a sense of gravity towards the actual substance of the exposition. This gives the speech direction and a sort of focus, but the details themselves keep changing. We start in December 1986, then we're in the fall of 1985, and eventually we end up in 1958, having moved from London to Edinburgh in the same clause. We're partially distracted by the strange American accent of Laurie, as well as the lively soundtrack, and while we're pulled along by these superficial elements of radio, the actual details and the content of the scene are in a state of absurd flux. The main thing holding these inconsistencies up is the functional form of the sentences, not breaking any grammar rules, just piling up ideas fluently so our attention isn't drawn to them. The internal logic of these kinds of sketches is similar to that of the parallel worlds of The League of Gentlemen, Monty Python and The Goon Show, but the crucial difference is the presentation. Without a laugh track, which these programs have, Saturday Night Fry is able to exist in the strange space between the real and familiar, referencing real people, programs, films, etc., but still containing fantastical and absurd ideas that wouldn't be out of place in a Python sketch. One moment they'll be talking about bias in the BBC, the next they'll be making a trip to the underworld in order to fulfill a Jim will fix it style wish, although that one didn't age too well, has to be said. What we end up with, taking all of these inconsistencies about format and language into account, is something which on the surface is passable as any other piece of radio, but in reality is incredibly postmodern and deconstructive. I haven't seen any other videos or writing about this program, which is a shame because I really think it's one of the best pieces of comedy ever written. If you haven't already, please do go and have a listen to it and tell me what you think.